On screen, they were untouchable heroes who outran danger, defied death, and lit up the world with their brilliance. But in the end, they all stopped breathing in the same cold, fluorescent place, the operating table. No cameras, no applause, only monitors, metal instruments, and the slow fade of a heartbeat. Golden Age stars, icons we believed immortal, lost their lives while trying to heal, to stay beautiful, or simply to fix what was breaking inside them. Number 1. Barbara Payton, Hollywood's fallen angel, who died chasing the face she once owned. Barbara Payton's story isn't just a Hollywood tragedy. It's the kind that feels scripted by a writer with a grudge against happy endings. She arrived in the late 1940s, like a burst of blonde lightning, beautiful, incandescent, and full of natural talent that hinted at a long, shimmering career. In Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, she held her own beside James Cagney, a rare feat for any young star, let alone a newcomer. For a moment, it looked like Barbara Payton was unstoppable. But Hollywood doesn't just build dreams, it shreds them when the shine fades. Scandals hit fast and viciously. A love triangle with actors, Franchot Tone and Tom Neal, spiraled into a violent confrontation that landed Tone in the hospital and Payton on every tabloid front page in America. Overnight, she went from rising star to radioactive. Studios backed away. Roles dried up. And Barbara, still so young, still so vulnerable, fell hard. By the mid-1950s, she was broke, drifting through arrests, affairs, and addictions. Her face, once her passport into Hollywood's golden gates, began to bear the marks of the life she'd been forced to survive. The press mocked her. Hollywood forgot her. The world watched her unravel with cruel fascination. But the final chapter is the one that cuts deepest. Officially, Barbara Payton died in 1967 of heart and liver failure at just 39 years old, damage from years of alcohol and drug abuse. But those closest to her whispered a more haunting account. She died on an operating table during a desperate attempt to reconstruct the beauty that had once made her valuable. Someone had offered financial help. A surgeon, likely not the kind who appears in glossy Beverly Hills brochures, agreed to repair her ruined features. For Barbara, it may have felt like the only chance at redemption, the last fragile bridge back to the woman she used to be. But her body, weakened and exhausted, couldn't handle the anesthesia. Her heart stopped mid-procedure. And in a way, it feels too fitting, too cruelly poetic. The town that once devoured her beauty pushed her toward one final, fatal attempt to reclaim it. Number 2, Ramon Novarro, Hollywood's silent-era god, who could not be saved by the scalpel. Ramon Novarro was once the face of a generation, a silent film deity, whose beauty, grace, and soulful eyes turned him into MGM's prized jewel. In Ben-Hur, 1925, he wasn't just acting. He was ascending, becoming the kind of icon whose image outlives entire eras. Audiences saw him as exotic, magnetic, untouchable. But the man behind the legend lived a far lonelier reality. Hollywood's golden age was merciless to gay actors, forcing them into secrecy, coded lives, and dangerous vulnerabilities. For Novarro, that secrecy would become the doorway to his destruction. On October 30th, 1968, Novarro invited two young brothers, Paul and Tom Ferguson, into his home. They weren't fans. They weren't friends. They were predators fueled by a rumor that the aging star kept thousands of dollars hidden in his house. What followed wasn't a robbery, it was torture. The attack was brutal beyond imagination. The brothers beat him, demanded money that didn't exist. By the time they left, Novarro's legendary face, once adored by millions, was shattered. His body, frail at 69, was failing. When he was found the next day, he was still alive, barely, Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, where surgeons attempted the impossible. They opened him up, fought to stop internal bleeding, battled the catastrophic trauma inflicted on his organs. But some injuries cannot be undone, not by medicine, not by miracles. Ramon Navarro died on the operating table not from medical error, but from wounds so vicious no human body could survive them. And the tragedy cuts deeper when you understand why he was alone that night. Hollywood had demanded he hide who he was. It punished authenticity and rewarded silence. So he lived and died in shadows cast by an industry that once celebrated him. The contrast is heartbreaking. A man who portrayed warriors and princes on screen dying not in battle, not in grandeur, but under fluorescent lights, while surgeons tried to piece him back together. He didn't die in bed. He died as doctors fought to reverse the cruelty the world had shown him. Number 3. Jeff Chandler, Hollywood's iron hero brought down by a simple cut. Jeff Chandler should have walked out of that hospital a healed man. Instead, Hollywood lost one of its strongest leading men to a mistake so ordinary and so devastating, it still feels unreal. In 1961, Chandler was at the height of his power, 6'4", silver-haired, a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. He was the kind of star studios built empires on, reliable, heroic, seemingly unbreakable. A pulled-back muscle during a friendly baseball game shouldn't have been the beginning of his end. Doctors recommended a routine surgery for a herniated disc, the kind thousands underwent every year. Nothing risky, nothing dramatic. But what happened in that operating room was the kind of nightmare no scriptwriter would dare pitch. A surgeon's slip, an artery nicked, a sudden rush of blood where none should have been. The team fought to stabilize him, but the damage had already carved its path. Infection crept in, and the man who embodied strength on screen faded in a hospital bed over the following weeks. He was only 42. Later medical experts questioned whether he even needed the surgery. Could rest have healed him? Was he rushed under the knife because a studio needed its leading man back under blazing lights? For a star whose image was built on rugged invincibility. The irony was brutal. Jeff Chandler didn't fall in battle. He fell to a preventable medical error. His final film hit theaters after his death, and audiences watched him march through danger with fearless resolve, unaware the hero had already slipped away. Behind the legend was a man, and behind a man was a body as fragile as any other proof that even Hollywood's iron heroes can bleed. Number 4. Joan Crawford. Hollywood's untouchable queen, haunted by a final fatal rumor. Joan Crawford built her empire out of disciplined desire and absolute control. She wasn't just a movie star, she was a self-forged myth, crafted through ice-water facials, brutal beauty routines, and a will strong enough to bend studio systems. For decades, she refused to age on camera or in life. If Hollywood demanded perfection, Crawford delivered it with claws sharpened. So when she died in 1977, the official report sounded almost too ordinary, a heart attack at home discovered by her housekeeper. Peaceful, simple, uncomplicated. Except nothing in Joan Crawford's life had ever been simple. Rumors spread almost instantly. Biographers, insiders, old friends, they all whispered the same electrifying possibility that Crawford hadn't died calmly in bed, but during a secret cosmetic procedure taking place inside her apartment. No hospital, no paperwork, no accountability. Just a woman who had spent her entire life battling time, possibly losing that battle in the most poetic and tragic way imaginable. And the rumor fit her too well. This was the woman who plunged her face into freezing bowls of ice until her skin stung, who scrubbed raw with lemon juice, who endured dental agony just to sharpen the angles of her face. The woman who declared, "I never go outside unless I look like Joan Crawford." At 73, perhaps she was still trying to look like the Joan Crawford. The world remembered one last lift, one last shot, one last illusion. Whether the rumor is truth or myth, it carries an ache that feels undeniably hers, a star who built an immortal image and may have died trying to preserve it. Joan Crawford's final chapter remains shrouded in mystery, but one thing is clear: Hollywood's untouchable queen left this world the same way she lived in it, fighting to control the narrative, even as the world watched breathlessly. Number 5. Jane Russell, Hollywood's original bombshell, who survived fame but not the recovery room. Jane Russell wasn't just a star, she was a force of nature. The brunette bombshell with curves that halted traffic and a voice that could melt steel, she exploded onto the screen in The Outlaw, and later dazzled alongside Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Hollywood marketed her body, the public worshipped it, and Russell carried that burden with a confidence that felt almost mythic. But unlike so many Golden Age icons who burned out, young Jane Russell defied the script. She lived long past her glory years, made peace with aging, and outlasted the Hollywood machine that once turned her into a symbol. She reached 89 a survivor in an industry that rarely lets its women grow old. And yet what finally claimed her wasn't scandal, vanity, or excess. It was something far more ordinary, far more universal. In her late 80s, Russell struggled with serious respiratory issues. Doctors recommended lung surgery, not a glamorous procedure, not a desperate attempt to hold on to youth, but a medically necessary operation many elderly patients face. The surgery itself went smoothly. Textbook, safe. A reminder that even bombshells become patients, even legends become human. But the danger wasn't in the operating room. It was in the fragile, unpredictable hours that followed. Like so many in advanced age, Russell's body simply couldn't recover from the trauma of anesthesia incision and the shock of healing. Complications crept in, breathing difficulties, weakened reserves, the slow unraveling of an aging body pushed beyond its limits. The woman who once captivated millions died of respiratory failure, not because of a mistake, but because time eventually collects its debts. There were no headlines about scandal or mystery, just the quiet, heartbreaking truth that even the most glamorous bodies grow tired. It is a different kind of tragedy. Jane Russell beat Hollywood's expectations only to lose to something that defeats us all: biology. Her death underscores a simple, sobering reality: no amount of fame, beauty, or privilege can shield anyone from the risks of age. Russell survived the spotlight. She survived the pressures of being the body before that title belonged to anyone else. But in the end, she could not survive the recovery room. Number 6. Jean Harlow, Hollywood's platinum miracle, lost to a surgery that came too late. Jean Harlow wasn't just a star, she was the spark that set an entire era on fire. The original blonde bombshell, the woman whose platinum hair and wicked smile rewrote Hollywood's definition of sex appeal. She moved through the 1930s like a comet, dazzling, electric, impossible to ignore. On screen, she was playful, sharp, irresistible. Off-screen, she was warm and funny, adored by crews, protected by MGM, and cherished by millions. And then, at just 26 years old, her body began to quietly betray her. It started with fatigue, then nausea, abdominal pain, swelling, symptoms no one, least of all MGM, wanted to acknowledge. The studio needed its brightest star to shine, not stumble. Her personal doctor insisted it was flu, maybe gallbladder trouble. Anything but something serious. Anything but the truth. But the truth was far darker. Harlow's kidneys were failing. As days passed, her condition worsened. Her skin became waxy and swollen. She struggled to breathe. Friends whispered that something was terribly wrong. Yet the misdiagnoses continued, precious time slipping through careless fingers. In an era before antibiotics, before dialysis, before modern nephrology, every hour mattered. By the time the real danger was recognized, Harlow was already drowning in her own toxins, uremic poisoning spreading through her body. Only emergency surgery offered a sliver of hope. Doctors prepared her for the procedure. Nurses moved around her with urgency. The room filled with the hum of machines and the desperate determination of professionals trying to save a life that should never have been at risk. But Jean Harlow Hollywood's brightest flame never made it to the operating table. She collapsed before the surgery could begin, slipping into unconsciousness from which she would never return. Moments later, the star who had lit up the world with laughter, mischief, and that unforgettable platinum glow was gone. She didn't die from scandal. She didn't die from excess. She died from delayed recognition, from the limits of 1930s medicine, and the tragic refusal to see that even goddesses get sick. Modern doctors believe she likely suffered from a kidney infection, something easily treatable today, which makes her death feel even crueler, even more senseless. Jean Harlow didn't have to die. She simply lived in the wrong decade. Number 7. Carol Landis, Hollywood's golden sweetheart, whose final makeover became her last heartbreak. Carol Landis was the kind of beauty that made Hollywood lean forward. Sunny, glowing, impossibly photogenic, she burst into the late 1930s like a California sunrise, fresh, bright, and full of promise. Studios adored her. Soldiers in WW2 pinned her photo inside their helmets. She danced, she sang, she joked, she charmed. Everyone thought Carol Landis had a future paved in gold. But Hollywood has a special talent. It knows how to love its women loudly and forget them quietly. By the mid-1940s, Landis's stardom flickered. Roles grew smaller, opportunities thinner. She tried everything new: agents, new hair, new publicists, new reinventions. Every time she stepped in front of a mirror, she saw the same cruel truth reflected back in Hollywood: a woman's value expires faster than a studio contract. So when she turned to cosmetic touch-ups, no one was surprised. Nothing major, nothing dramatic. Just small procedures, tweaks to stay competitive, polish to keep the spotlight a little longer. But behind those little fixes was a woman spiraling in private. She was exhausted, heartbroken, in love with a married man who refused to leave his wife. Countless rejections, broken promises, and closed doors piled onto her shoulders like weights she could no longer carry. On the night before her final appointment for a facial rejuvenation procedure, a last quiet attempt to restore the version of herself Hollywood once adored, Carol Landis broke. The official story claims she died from a fatal overdose of sleeping pills. But friends insisted there was more to it, that she had undergone a minor cosmetic treatment. Shortly before that, she reacted badly, that her physical and emotional state had collapsed together in a perfect, tragic storm. What's certain is this: Carol Landis died trying to hold on to the beauty Hollywood demanded of her, even after it stopped rewarding her for having it. She was found the next morning perfectly dressed, perfectly made up, perfectly staged, like a woman trying to control her final close-up. And maybe that's the saddest truth of all. Number 8. Clara Bow Hollywood's original It Girl, whose final fight ended under surgical lights. Clara Bow wasn't just famous, she was phenomenal. The original It Girl, the woman who defined the word magnetic long before anyone used it to describe celebrities. In the 1920s, she ruled the screen with a wild, irresistible charm that made America fall head over heels. She was raw, real, and alive in a way Hollywood had never seen before and hasn't seen since. But fame for Clara Bow came with a brutal price. Behind her vivacious smile were scars no camera could capture: childhood trauma, tabloid slander, cruel betrayals, and a studio system that treated her like a product rather than a person. By her early 30s, she was done with Hollywood, and Hollywood, hungry for new faces, was done with her too. She retreated into a quiet, rural life far from the lights that once burned her. But the body remembers stress even when the world forgets the star. In her later years, Bow battled chronic anxiety, insomnia, and debilitating health issues. Doctors eventually recommended a surgical procedure to address complications from long-term medication use, a routine operation on by 1965 standards. Nothing extraordinary. For a woman who had survived everything from abusive relatives to Hollywood gossip, a minor surgery seemed like nothing at all. But Clara Bow's life was never defined by the ordinary. During the procedure, complications struck: rapid blood pressure drops, breathing difficulties, signs of a heart struggling under anesthesia. The surgical team fought to stabilize her, but her body, exhausted after decades of emotional and physical strain, simply couldn't continue. Clara Bow died on the operating table, far from Hollywood, far from fame, far from the world that once screamed her name. And isn't that the cruelest irony? The woman who electrified a generation with pure breathing vitality took her last breath, not in a glamorous mansion or under the glow of studio lamps, but in a sterile operating room where no one recognized the legend lying still. She had given Hollywood everything: her youth, her innocence, her fire, and in the end, she slipped away quietly, almost anonymously. Number 9. Marie McDonald. Hollywood's perfect body trapped in a mystery death no one could cleanly explain. Marie McDonald didn't walk into Hollywood, she was sculpted for it. Studio publicists didn't bother pretending otherwise. They branded her the body, a woman prized less for performance than for perfection. Cameras adored her. Audiences worshipped her. But beneath the glossy posters and pin-up curves was someone living inside a cage built from her own beauty. Her career never escaped that cage. Hollywood wanted her to be seen, not heard, and when the spotlight dimmed, it left her with nothing but the pressure to stay perfect. By the early 1960s, McDonald's life was already unraveling. 7 marriages, tabloid scandals, a bizarre kidnapping claim many believed she staged, prescription pills to sleep pills to wake pills to make the days tolerable. Each year chipped away at the flawless image the studios forced on her. And each year, she seemed more desperate to hold on to the one thing Hollywood had ever valued: her looks. Then came 1965, her final shadowed chapter. The official cause of death was simple on paper: a drug overdose at age 42. Tragic, yes, but clean, uncomplicated, exactly the kind of explanation Hollywood preferred when one of its former beauties died. Except nothing about Marie McDonald's life had ever been clean or uncomplicated. Almost immediately, whispers spread that her body had been found staged, positioned to look like an overdose, that she had actually been undergoing a cosmetic procedure quiet off the books, maybe even illegal, that something had gone terribly, fatally wrong. There were murmurs of surgical tools, unlicensed hands, a room not meant for medical work, and a star terrified of aging, submitting herself to one last attempt at restoration. If the rumors were true, then Marie McDonald didn't die from pills. She died trying to preserve the face and body Hollywood demanded of her. It feels painfully fitting. She was built as a symbol, marketed as perfection, and ultimately punished for being human. Her death remains an open wound of contradictions, official reports that don't quite add up. a body discovered under suspicious circumstances, and an industry all too eager to bury the messy parts of a story that once made them millions. Number 10. Eddie Fisher, Hollywood's golden voice that faded out under anesthesia. Eddie Fisher didn't conquer Hollywood through looks or danger or myth. He conquered it with a voice. Smooth, romantic, impossibly pure, his tenor carried him from neighborhood stages to national fame, turning him into one of America's most beloved crooners of the 1950s. Before rock and roll took over, Eddie Fisher was the sound of love in America. But just as powerful as his voice was the storm of his personal life. His marriages to Debbie Reynolds and Elizabeth Taylor turned into one of Hollywood's messiest, most public scandals. Taylor left him for Richard Burton. Tabloids devoured him, and slowly, the spotlight that once adored him began to burn rather than bless. Still, Fisher endured. He reinvented himself, moved into television, lived long enough to see his era turn into nostalgia, his records into memories cherished by millions. By 2010, he was 82 years old, an age few golden age celebrities ever reached. His final act came not from scandal, not from self-destruction, but from something heartbreakingly ordinary. He needed hip surgery, the kind nearly every elderly patient eventually faces. It wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't experimental. It was simply a procedure to ease pain, to help him walk, to let him live his final years with dignity. Doctors performed it successfully. By all accounts, the operation itself went exactly as planned. But the danger in old age isn't always the surgery. It's what happens after. In the hours and days following the procedure, Fisher's body, weakened by time, began to falter. Complications crept in: respiratory trouble, circulatory strain, the quiet collapse that happens when an aging body cannot recover from trauma, even when everything was done right. And so the man whose voice once soared effortlessly across radios and concert halls never fully woke again. He died not in the middle of drama, not during a scandal, but in the soft, sterile quiet of a recovery room, his life gently slipping away under the lingering haze of anesthesia. There's a bittersweet poetry to it. Eddie Fisher, the man who sang to millions leaving this world in silence. No headlines screamed, no controversies exploded. His passing was ordinary, achingly, beautifully ordinary. And maybe that's what makes it sting. A man who lived such a turbulent, sensational life was claimed by the same quiet medical risks that take so many elderly patients every year. Number 11. Constance Bennett, Hollywood's elegant goddess undone by a bolt of fate in a dentist's chair. Constance Bennett was the kind of star Hollywood didn't just admire, it aspired to be. Sophisticated, razor-smart, effortlessly glamorous, she glided through the 1930s as one of the highest-paid actresses in America. In films like Topper, she embodied control, poise, and a cool, sparkling wit that made her seem almost immune to chaos. If other stars burned hot, Bennett shimmered steady, polished, untouchable. Which is why the way she died feels so surreal, so violently at odds with the life she projected. There was no scandal, no risky elective procedure, no desperate attempt to fight age, just a routine dental appointment, the kind millions of people undergo every day without a second thought. She walked in expecting nothing more than discomfort, perhaps a numbing shot, maybe a mild inconvenience before returning to her busy life. But in the middle of that ordinary appointment, something extraordinary and catastrophic happened. Without warning, Bennett suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, a sudden rupture, a silent explosion inside her skull. One moment she was upright, the next she was collapsing, her elegant composure shattered in an instant. Dentists and staff scrambled to save her, shifting the room from clinical calm to emergency chaos. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. Surgeons prepared for desperate intervention, a race to relieve the pressure, to stop the bleeding, to pull her back from the brink. But the human brain, once wounded like this, rarely forgives. Despite everything done for her, Constance Bennett died on the operating table, not from error, not from vanity, from a fluke of biology that could strike anyone anywhere without mercy. And that is the heartbreak of her story. Bennett, who spent her life mastering every detail, her craft, her finances, her image, was undone by the one thing no star, no matter how luminous, can control: randomness. A twist of fate so rare it defies logic. A tragedy that makes no commentary, offers no moral, reflects no excess or downfall. Just cruel, senseless chance. She went in for a routine procedure and never came out. It's the kind of line Hollywood might reject for being too brutal, too sudden, too real. Yet that is how one of its most refined icons exited the world quietly, unexpectedly, in a place as mundane as a dental office, proving in the starkest way possible that even the most carefully crafted lives can be upended in a single unpredictable moment.